Welcome to Someone Else Show, Ep.9. This week has been a busy one. There were three major headlines that occurred this week. And for once, I'm going to go over them at the start of the episode because they're very big and important. The first one, in chronological order, was Joe Biden pardoning his son Hunter Biden. The second was South Korea's president ordering martial law, and then the South Korean parliament striking it down. And then finally, the CEO of UnitedHealth's insurance arm was assassinated in New York City. And we're just going to go over them in chronological order for simplicity's sake here. So we begin with that news of Joe Biden pardoning his son Hunter Biden. It happened on Sunday night, like literally after that day's episode had been recorded and it was already in the process of being uploaded, right? So that's why it wasn't in the episode. It was already too late. But on Sunday night, Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter Biden after he had been convicted on various charges relating to tax fraud and like the some gun charges that he had been convicted of earlier in the year, right? But we're just gonna go further than that. We're just gonna go over the whole backstory, kind of summed up. So earlier this year, right, that case gets brought up against Hunter Biden, and it obviously all kind of stemmed way back to the laptop, right, the infamous laptop that had been left at a computer repair shop that was then discovered to have a whole bunch of compromising photos, emails, all that kind of stuff. And that, remember, at the time, was suppressed by the media and dismissed as a Russian hoax, because that was during kind of the later stages of the 2020 election cycle. And they didn't want that out there because it would have actually lost Joe Biden the election. And there is data out there that actually does suggest this, right? Where there's data that suggests that there were enough voters who, when they were asked about this, they said if they had known about the laptop, that they would have voted for Trump instead of Biden. And there were enough of those people that said that, and when they were asked, that the election would have actually gone the other way. Now, obviously, that didn't happen. We move on. We fast forward, and the laptop, after the election is done with, right? It gets confirmed to be real, and the story finally really begins to gain traction, right? Especially as time goes on. Now, Hunter Biden starts to face down multiple charges, some related to his overseas activities, where he was basically just using the Biden name and selling influence to the White House. So there was all of this stuff about him getting paid for terrible paintings, and being on the board of a Ukrainian energy company despite having no real qualifications. Right, basically just going around getting money for himself and the rest of the Biden family, including in one of the emails found on the laptop, right, referencing Joe Biden as the big guy, right, getting a percentage cut of the money, right. And then the 2024 election cycle begins, and Trump has all these phony, inflated, blown up charges and court cases directed at him, either directly by Joe Biden's DOJ or kind of more indirectly in some of the cases, right? Especially the one in New York with the 34 felony counts or whatever that weren't actually felony counts, but they were inflated to be felony counts somehow by some weird shenanigans that don't even make sense. But anyways, and when there was pressure eventually on the DOJ, because they were just constantly going after Trump, so it's like, well, they felt this pressure to appear more politically neutral somehow, right? They didn't want to be like, feeding fuel to the fire of people going, well, you're only going after one side of the aisle here. That seems pretty corrupt and very partisan, don't you think? And so they're like, we're gonna try and save face here and try and seem like we're not actually corrupt and being used as a politicized weapon by the Democrats. And the strategy was, in addition to going after Trump, was to also convict Hunter Biden. Now, the reason it even got that far, right, with them really going after and convicting Hunter in the first place was that originally, when they were going after Hunter, right, the special counsel in the case had actually tried to basically help Hunter slip through the cracks via a very corrupt fairy tale plea deal where basically all charges regarding Hunter's activities overseas and the finances tied to what he was doing are things related to the Foreign Agent Registration Acts and also just simple tax violations. Um, all right, and basically all the charges were going to get swept under the rug, and Hunter would get off with essentially just some community service. Right, was basically the gist of it. And now it was so obviously corrupt that the judge looked at it and said, we can't let you get away with this one, right? And so it was stricken down, right? And so then they went back around and came back with a agreement of a guilty plea, and Hunter would be found guilty. He would be charged with 3 felony and 6 misdemeanor tax offenses, along with a gun charge for when he lied that he wasn't on drugs but was actually actively a drug addict when he filled out the forms that you need to fill out when you go and purchase a gun, right? He it says on there, are you addicted to drugs or whatever? He said no, even though he was actively on drugs. So that's another count that was against him. But even before all that came down, right? Even before the guilty plea was announced, Joe Biden had been asked and then had stated, probably in some sort of cahoots with the DOJ, honestly, to try and uphold the masquerade of having no partisanship, right, and using the DOJ and weaponizing it. He said that he would not pardon Hunter if he was found guilty. Then, of course, the guilty plea comes down and the charges are dispensed. And then again, Joe Biden states that he will not be pardoning Hunter Biden. But now that the election is over and Trump won, the DOJ isn't going to be able to go after Trump anymore, right? And will now be getting cleared out by the Trump administration. And they will, right now, they no longer have to try and wear the mask of political neutrality. And so essentially, Joe Biden has just gotten the green light to pardon Hunter Biden, right? They don't have to maintain that appearance, so they don't need to have Hunter Biden being prosecuted, comparatively to Trump, right? There was a juxtaposition, right? You have Trump and you have Hunter Biden to kind of try and balance each other out. But now that you're not going after Trump, you don't need the counterweight of Hunter Biden, so then you just pardon him anyways. And it was going to happen no matter what, right? Whenever the Trump cases ended, one way or the other, right? Either in Trump's favor or against Trump. Whenever the cases ended one way or the other, right? Whenever that weight was taken off this side of the scale, right? The right side of the scale, right? Whenever that weight was taken off, right, and the case ended, then you wouldn't need the counterweight on the left of Hunter Biden being prosecuted. So then they would go and pardon him anyways. So that's what happened on Sunday night. Joe Biden pardoned Hunter not only for the charges he had been found guilty of in that case, but also just kind of literally whatever else he might have done that we may or may not know about yet, or may or maybe ever will know, going all the way back to January 1st of 2014, all the way up through the day that the pardon was announced, which was December 1st, 2024. Actually, Biden actually announced and signed the pardon with a couple hours left in the day on December 1st. So theoretically, in between the time that the pardon was signed and the time that the pardon had effect through, right, there were a few more hours left on December 1st. So actually, Hunter could have gone and done literally anything he could have wanted to, and the pardon would have applied to whatever he had done in the remainder of the day. But anyways, that aside, that's just kind of a fun little factoid. All of this, of course, is basically tied to the money gathering effort by Hunter Biden on behalf of Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden also by proxy is off the hook, right? This is the other thing, right? Since he was tied to the illegal things via Hunter, right? Hunter was the one, getting money corruptly, right? And the connection between the illegal money and Joe was Hunter, right? Hunter was the middleman, right? Basically, right? Maybe not literally, but figuratively at least, right? In this chain, right? You have money on one end, and you have Joe Biden on the other, right? Money, Joe Biden. In the middle, right, the money is starting here. It goes to Hunter Biden, and from Hunter Biden, it goes to Joe Biden. So if you pardon Hunter Biden, you cut the chain in the middle here, and now you have a gap between the money and Joe. So by proxy, Joe Biden pardoning Hunter Biden also gets Joe off the hook for however he would have been related to this stuff as well. And then that's not the only thing happening in terms of the pardons at the White House. There appears to be there are discussions going on in the White House about who else Joe Biden should preemptively pardon because they are worried about the Trump DOJ looking into them. And their reasoning is because they fear Trump is going to weaponize the DOJ against them. As if the DOJ wasn't already weaponized and corrupt on behalf of the Democrats. Now Trump is just going to clear house and kind of, shine the light back on the Democrats. And you can just look at some of the activity of the DOJ over the past couple of years under Joe Biden, we find that there is reason for Trump to go and clear house, and because like the record reads as follows, right? They go raid Mar-a-Lago, they try to convict Trump of mishandling documents. That eventually kind of stalls out and is now withered away, especially now that Trump has been elected. And actually, Joe Biden at some point also gets charged for the same thing of mishandling documents from when he was vice president. Right? I remember they found boxes of documents from that time in his garage next to his car. But the only reason they didn't go anywhere with that is, or they didn't go after Joe Biden like they did with Trump. Is they just go, well, he's too senile to stand trial. Which actually, right, for all the Democrats who cry about how Joe Biden didn't step down soon enough in the election to give Kamala a chance, right? They complain about only having 107 days. You could have 25th amended Joe Biden on the spot, basically, when that happened, right? When he was declared too senile to stand trial. You could have then said, well, he's too mentally deficient or senile or whatever it is you want to use to be president. We can 25th amendment him. And you would have basically had, that would have been like 2 years before the election. You would have had 2 years to get your feet underneath you, right? And so you complain about not getting enough time. You complain about only 107 days. Joe Biden didn't drop out soon enough. You could have gotten rid of him 2 years ago. So don't complain about this. You are the ones complaining about losing this game that you are the only ones even playing, right? You're the only ones playing this game, and you're still somehow losing, right? You're losing to yourselves. You're losing to your past selves. But anyways, moving on, Trump gets put on also on trial in New York on those blown up charges that weren't felony counts, but then somehow got elevated to felony counts, despite the fact that the federal agency is charged of investigating those kinds of things. Originally came to the conclusion that there wasn't enough evidence to kind of try and prosecute the case, but then the New York prosecutor guy goes, I'll just do it myself, and then somehow it elevates to federal charge. I don't even know how that, no one really knows actually how that makes sense, but that happened anyways. And the DOJ was kind of secretly behind the curtains on that one, so they are involved. Anyways, and then Trump gets convicted of the 34 felony counts, right? That the Democrats love to point at and go, he's a criminal, even though we just basically made everything up and convicted him of fake things, right? You may as well convict him of breathing the wrong way, right? But anyways, that case, and then also ones like the one in Georgia are now being dropped because the DOJ can't prosecute a sitting president, or in this case, a president-elect. And so then when this happened, right, finally, Hunter Biden case was where it was only done to try and kind of balance out against Trump, right, and to have that perception of neutrality going on. And now that they no longer have to maintain that, it no longer had a purpose to serve. So Hunter got the pardon that he was always going to get, whether or not Trump got elected and couldn't be convicted, or Trump lost and then got convicted. Right? It didn't matter whether or not Trump was going to jail. Hunter was going to get pardoned either way. And that is the record of the Biden DOJ in the public consciousness. Right? This is obviously very summed up. There's a whole lot of other things, but this is the general gist of what most people are going to think about over the past, 4-ish years, just short of 4-ish years, right, under the Biden-Harris administration, right? It's just terrible and corrupt all the way down and even past the core, right? And now here's the thing. The DOJ being used as a weapon by the Democrats is the first seemingly nuclear move in like the political back and forth. Except, as I'll briefly describe shortly, the Democrats are the only ones who have been exploring using political nuclear options in this back and forth. It's been a one-way kind of thing here, because there are two other ones the Democrats have historically been super uppity about. One is to pack the Supreme Court, right? They were super unhappy that Trump got to appoint judges, right? And now the court is leaning in the conservative direction, right? They're super upset about this. And so then they were openly talking about if they had won the 2024 election, they would have done that, but they would have first needed to do this other political nuclear option, which is to get rid of the filibuster, right? Now the thing with both is, much like a nuke, there is technically an advantage to being the one to launch first, but just like in nuclear war, it's still mutually assured destruction, even though but because you launch first, I guess the technical advantage is you launch your nukes, the other country detects the nukes that are incoming against them, then they launch their nukes, their country gets destroyed, and then a few minutes later, your country gets destroyed. So you get to live a few minutes longer in this mutually assured destruction. That's, I guess, technically an advantage, even though you still lose anyways. But anyways, the gist of it is, just like in mutually assured destruction, right? It's mutually assured destruction of nuclear war, right? You launch this kind of weapon, and then the other side turns around and launches the same kind of weapon back at you. Right, and this is why the Democrats were very openly stating that if they had won the election, they would try to get rid of the filibuster and would get rid of the filibuster and proceed to pack the Supreme Court. However, now that they lost, they say that they will actually be in favor of keeping the filibuster and try to use it to stall the Republicans as much as possible. Right there, this is one of the games that they kind of play. This is always their move is, only when it benefits them are they in favor of whatever, right? If getting rid of the filibuster benefits them at that very particular moment, then they're going to get rid of the filibuster. If it benefits them to keep the filibuster at a given particular moment, then they're going to be in favor of keeping it, right? And they kind of always do this flip flopping back and forth. But anyways, now the issue is with doing something like getting rid of the filibuster and then packing the Supreme Court into being very much on their side of the aisle, is that when you lose the majority, then the other party now gets to do the same thing, against you or in their favor, right? So what happens is, every time the balance of power shifts in Congress, the party who gains power would then pack the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court would then, as a result, would be more likely to pass or to let laws slide that were more partisan, right? Like you would go, and then in Congress you would be passing all these laws that would be very much made and written in the style that the way that the party in power reads the Constitution, right? So if the Democrats are in power, right, they would read the Constitution the way that they interpret it, and they would make laws like that. And then the Democratic Supreme Court, or the Democrat Supreme Court, would then also interpret it the same way and be much more likely to kind of play ball, right, and kind of agree that that's how the Constitution should be interpreted, and thus you get more partisan laws going by without their constitutionality being challenged, and so the country would then, as a result, swing very far in that direction. Right, but then let's say, but then of course, right, when the other party comes in power, and let's say this kind of swing happens every 4 years with the presidential election, right? Since you still need to have the presidency to have the president actually sign the laws into effect, right? Because the president can sign or veto them. So when the next election happens, the other party, when the next election happens, let's say the other party takes control, then they do the same thing, right? They then pack the Supreme Court even more to then switch the balance back to their side, and then they go and pass laws in Congress that are very much in their style of interpreting the Constitution and the laws of the United States. And so then the country will then shift back in the other direction all the way to the other extreme. And so now every time this swing happens, and this goes for the various departments of government as well, right? Including the ones tasked with enforcing those laws. That would be where the DOJ comes in, right? The various things we've gone over so far about this, about the DOJ in this episode, right? Those things were attempted. They attempted to do these things and did so while using only the laws that are currently on hand, right? Imagine if this weaponized DOJ had laws made in this theoretical scenario of no filibuster, Supreme Court packing, and passing of extreme laws, of any kind of extreme laws as the party in control pleases, right? Imagine how far they could have gone in that scenario, right? If they had super partisan laws. But enough about this extreme hypothetical. Let's actually look at kind of another story, right? The thing going on in South Korea, which is kind of an extension of the situation right now, which is that the DOJ, right, is a weaponized organization of the executive branch, meaning the party presumably in control of at least the presidency continues to go after political opponents using only the laws on the books, and particularly those on corruption, which is where South Korea does come into play here. Because on Tuesday, the South Korean president Yoon Suk Yeol invoked martial law in the country, doing so under Title IX of Korea's Martial Law Act. He released a statement explaining his reasoning. Part of it reads, quote, "Since the inauguration of our government, the National Assembly has initiated 22 impeachment motions against government officials since the inauguration of the 22nd National Assembly in June. It is pushing for impeachment of 10 more. This is a situation that is not only unprecedented in any country in the world, but has never been seen since the founding of our country. It is paralyzing the judiciary, intimidating judges, and impeaching a number of prosecutors, and it is paralyzing the executive branch by trying to impeach the Minister of the Interior, the Chairman of the Communications Commission, the Chair of the Board of Audits, and the Defense Minister." And then it goes on to say about how they're also wielding the national budget against the executive branch and the rest of government and whatnot. So what this all means is the situation kind of goes like this. And just for clarity, the president of South Korea is from the conservative side of the aisle in Korean politics, and the party in control of the Korean Assembly is on the Democrat side of the political aisle, right? They're on the left, and they're actually, conveniently, they are called the Democrats in Korea as well. But anyways, so what happened was that the Korean Democrats called for special investigations, right, using Korea's version of the DOJ, into their political opponents, specifically the family of the South Korean president. Actually, his wife in particular was actually exonerated in the investigation. But then afterwards, then that same prosecutionary office they turned their attention around back on the Korean Democrats, and started investigating them on corruption charge, or on suspicion of corruption. All right, so then what happened? The Democrats of Korea have now been actually trying to impeach those prosecutors when they turn their attention on them. All right. So what we see is that there has been like the back and forth going on over using prosecutionary power of the government, and the South Korean president basically went, well, you guys are trying to weaponize the government against me and my party, and when that backfired on the South Korean Democrats, right, when that backfired on you, you then go and try and effectively dismantle said prosecutionary office of the government before they can investigate you and expose you of the things that you are now seemingly trying to have remain hidden, since you seem to be very panicked by the investigation being turned around and focusing on you instead. So his response was, right, because then they go around, they try and, do a bunch of impeachments to try and weaponize the budget of the government. They try and basically defund the government as a whole, but then as a result also would defund the prosecutionary office with these special prosecutors that are looking into them, right? And it's basically just bogging down the entire thing. So the South Korean president, his response was to attempt to invoke martial law to try and forcibly put an end to these political shenanigans going on over weaponization of various aspects of government. Now, of course, this is, as I think we can kind of safely say, would be categorized as an overreaction, right? But then, so of course, what happened was afterwards was this martial law gets invoked, and this happens sometime. I don't know. Maybe it was it was sometime not during work hours, right? It was dark out. It was either late in the evening or at night or early in the morning, right? One of those, right? Which means that the Korean assembly was not present at the parliament building when martial law was declared, and because of that, because of the martial law being declared, the Korean military under martial law went to the building, enforcing the martial law, and they basically formed like a blockade essentially outside of the building, or maybe a little bit inside it as well. And the members of the assembly all showed up and basically kind of pushed their way past the blockade. And this was being done because there is a provision of the Martial Law Act in Korea that allows for the National Assembly to overrule the imposing of martial law via a vote in Parliament. So eventually, enough members of the Assembly actually got past the military blockade of the entrances of the building. They all, enough of them got in. Not all of them, just enough to hold a vote. And that vote was held. And that vote came to the conclusion to overrule the martial law unanimously, 190-0. And this included members of both the Korean left and right. But what this represents is something that could similarly kind of happen in the U.S. Maybe not the martial law part, but very, very much the visceral back and forth of political parties trying to weaponize whatever parts of the government they happen to be controlling at any given moment in order to undermine the system in a way that favors themselves. And eventually this sort of thing could escalate into all political nuclear warfare right now. In this case, right, with the filibuster pact in the Supreme Court and there's probably a bunch of other things as well. Anyways, now in this case in South Korea, and as we went over earlier about the DOJ here in the U.S., it's all about prosecutionary power, right? The thing in South Korea going on is the Democrats of South Korea try to use the prosecutionary office, their version of DOJ, against the conservative party in Korea. Then that went nowhere. Then that same prosecutionary office was turned around and used against the Democrats. Sounds familiar, right? We just went over this whole thing of how the Democrats under the Biden-Harris administration here were trying to weaponize the DOJ against conservatives, and now the conservatives are going to have the DOJ shine their light on the Democrats, right? This is very similar. All right. So, and the issue is that people for the longest time have kind of lived under the assumption that government agencies are nonpartisan, but that's a lie, and it always has been, right? And secretly, kind of people have kind of known this, right? Because people who work at these places are they're voters, right? These people have political opinions, and thus are going to be partisan to some degree, right? Right? What degree that is depends on person to person, but they're gonna presume, right? They work, they're gonna vote, they're gonna have political opinions, and they're gonna be partisan. But now it's not subtle, right? Now it's very wide open, right? Now it's very blatant, right? And the only way that these agencies, I think, are ever going to not be partisan overall, right? The only way to kind of have that happen is either to dismantle them completely, just get rid of them anyways, because the other option would be to have basically both sides can fully unleash their partisanship at the agency, but at the same time, right? Not flipping back and forth every election cycle, or however often it happens, where one party takes control of I guess in this case the executive branch, because that controls the DOJ, and then weaponizes it, right? If you could have both, right, be somehow equally in control and exert their partisanship on the agency in equal measure at the same time, it would just negate, right? They would just negate each other, and then nothing would get done anyways. Because it doesn't seem like there's going to be an ability for people to kind of push aside their political differences enough to exist together and actually get stuff done in a truly bipartisan way. But it's a more complicated thing to solve than I can probably manage to come up with, or I couldn't come up with any really good solution, right? And the whole thing's more complicated than the way I'm making it out to be. I'm just kind of trying to simplify it here. So anyways, moving on to actually the third big story of the week, which is that the CEO of UnitedHealth's insurance arm, right? Because there's UnitedHealth, which is kind of just a more broader company, and then one of their branches is UnitedHealth Insurance, right? And each branch of the company has its own CEO, and then the overall company has a CEO at the very top, right? But the CEO of UnitedHealth's insurance arm, a guy named Brian Thompson, was shot in an assassination outside of a New York City hotel. And there is video, but obviously, it's gruesome. It's a murder after all. So if you want to see it, you can go look it up for yourself, but we're not going to show it here. But the sort of play-by-play breakdown, kind of summed up, goes like this. Thompson walks past the assassin who was lurking in the shadows, and the shooter, kind of steps out, shoots Thompson once, then twice, kind of from a little bit further of a distance, then calmly walks up to the body, right, and fires a third shot at it on the ground, right, when it's already down, right, just kind of for good measure, right. Then proceeds to leave on foot. And as of the writing of the script, and as of the recording of this video, the suspect has not been caught or identified. But what is known is that the suspect spent about 10 days in New York, and had stayed at a hostel using a fake New Jersey driver's license. And at the hostel, actually, the suspect, who had been seen, in any footage they had of him, had always had this kind of mask on, this kind of maybe not like a mask for that you had like COVID, but like like a scarf kind of mask, something like that. But he did actually, when he was at the hostel at the front desk, pull it down and reveal his face in what I assume was. He probably handed the fake driver's license to the person working the desk, and they were like, "Well, can I just see your face to try and match the face of the photo? Because even though it's a fake license, all the information is fake on it. The person who's wielding the fake license still has their photo on it, to be like, so when someone looks at the photo on the fake license, and they look at the person, it's like, yeah, that's the person. And so that's probably what might have been happening there." Anyways, so there are photos of the assassin from that, right, with his mask down, and also there are plenty of opportunities they could have had to pull a photo of him with the mask up, which they also have. All right, and so those are out there and available, and there was a good chance somewhere out there, a group of people on the internet might figure this one out before any law enforcement does. Although I can assume that 4chan is not too interested, because if 4chan was interested, they probably would have cracked the case already by now for sure. But law enforcement does have a chance due to the advantage of finding a backpack in Central Park, identical to the one seen on the assassin wearing in the video of the event. And the backpack is actually where they found the fake New Jersey driver's license, along with a burner phone and a water bottle that will be examined for DNA. And then also, finally, the last known location of the suspect was at a Greyhound bus station that offers routes to New Jersey, along with Boston, Philadelphia, and then most concerningly, to Washington, D.C. Now, the news of this assassination, however, has sparked not a sense of concern or worry about what is happening in society, but instead has sparked a sense of joy for the communists on the left, who love seeing bad things such as murder happen to their capitalist enemies. All right, the left has been really enthralled with spreading around this image. Actually, it's kind of meme they made up, because and it's terrible. The left is terrible at making memes in celebration of this event. Here it is. It's a star with a smiley face and some balloons, and it also has some thumbs up emojis. The whole thing just basically looks like a bunch of emojis with the caption "CEO down." All right. And basically, the way that they're treating it is this old. It's kind of an old mantra of communism, right? Of the communist left, where someone who makes money in the West under capitalism is a bad person, right? Which honestly is kind of refreshing to hear, because at least it's an old school left notion, right? It's not this modern DEI, gender theory, gender mutilation, DEI junk, right? At least it's an old fashioned thing, right? It's kind of refreshing to have the old fashioned thing every once in a while. It's simpler. But anyways, now it's still the same belief system though. Right, they justify the death of the CEO of an insurance branch of a health company because they didn't like them. Which is the same reason for everything else that the left does and supports, right? Anything they don't like, they justify any level of action against said thing or person, even if the action they take is actually unacceptable. And conversely, if you are someone or something that the left likes, then anything you do is okay for you to do, as long as it's against something that the left dislikes. Either even more than you, or they like you and they dislike the other thing, and it's more black and white. Even if in reality the appropriate course of action was not what you did. Fuck, I have to edit this. I have to fucking edit this shit now. Or conversely, if you are in Israel or Daniel Penny and you take appropriate action in a situation, but that action doesn't align with the left's view, then you need to have only the worst things happen to you, right? That's their logic. Which brings me to two other stories that happened this week. One being that the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah broke down already. Hezbollah was seen moving fighters and equipment basically all around the buffer zone that had been proposed, as well as resupplying, and then they had fired 2 missiles into Israel, which landed in the middle of nowhere. But it still prompted a response in kind from Israel. And then, of course, both sides kind of blamed the other for breaking the ceasefire, and now it's over, right? Who could have seen that coming, right? It's not really that much of a surprise. Also, the trial of Marine veteran Daniel Penny in New York has reached jury deliberations, and so far it has been a stalemate. The jury has yet to come back with a verdict, and if you recall, If you've ever heard about the story, Penny is being charged of being in doing things the left doesn't like. The things being on a subway in New York, there was a drugged up, violent, with a criminal record, homeless guy who was going around threatening passengers on the subway. Penny, sensing this guy was very much a danger to those on board, went to subdue him, and ultimately he did this with the help of others on the subway, putting him into a submission hold, which was designed to simply make a person pass out. That's assuming if you are a normal person who isn't on a heavy amount of drugs. But of course, this homeless criminal was on a lot of drugs and died due to the complications of being on said drugs and being put into a submission hold. Which to you and I seems like kind of just an unfortunate outcome to what was a good action. But of course, since Daniel Penny was white and the drugged up criminal, in addition to being a drugged up criminal, which the left also views as a positive trait, was also black. So the intersectional woke agenda alignment is still very much at the forefront of the decision making of left, because they went, well, it's a white person and a black person. A white person has to be the bad, has to be the bad in this story, right? And another thing that happened this week is actually part of that radical left woke agenda is actually on the docket this week at the Supreme Court, and is going to continue to be for a while. There is a case being heard right now on the topic of gender transitions for minors. And to sum up the backstory, there was a law passed in Tennessee that banned transgender procedures from being done on minors. This was then challenged in courts, where it was upheld. Not the challenge, but the law banning the transgender procedures. But then, of course, it was appealed, and it's been appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, the argument is actually very simple, which is that children are dumb. All right, it is basically that simple. Children don't know enough to have any clue about their gender or sexuality. Right? The left argues that the children, even at the ages where they don't know their ABCs or 1, 2, 3s, somehow know everything there is to know about their body and their own self-perceptions, right? Like that when a 4-year-old boy or girl says that they are, the opposite sex, it is to be treated as if the child knows exactly what they are talking about, and that this was a conclusion that they came to due to like their own self-evaluation, right? That there's somehow they have this enough consciousness and enough knowledge of themselves and the world or something to somehow come up with this conclusion independently. But in reality, if you ever see, I guess like interviews or like news pieces or whatever, when you see these children being asked, why do you believe this, right? Why is this what you think, right? Why is this the conclusion that you're coming to, right? They, right, at this age specifically, right, these younger ages, they come to this conclusion, right, and they say, or the child will say in response, is because their parents told them that's what they are, right? That will be what the child says. They're asked, why do you think that you're there? If the child is a boy and they think they're a girl, right? They're asked, why do you think you're a girl instead of a boy? And they go, well, because my parents told me I was, right? Or then vice versa, right? If it's a girl and they think that they're a boy, the parents, and the child says, because my parents told me so, right? The child has no idea, right? Because this is what children do at this early age, right? This is literally how children kind of learn at like young ages. They literally just repeat back things that they are told, and right, things that they are told, and also that things that that have been enforced onto them from their parents, from an even earlier age sometimes, and maybe even since the moment of birth. Now, if they aren't exposed to this, and they are at that point by the time they reach school, then they get exposed to this by leftist teachers who, at the first chance they see to bring it up, will bring it up, and then either keep it a secret from the parents, or the parents find out, and the parents get told that these kind of scare tactics, where it basically just goes, would you rather have, an alive child who is the other gender from the one that they were born, or would you rather have this child end up dead from suicide due to mental distress of not being affirmed and transitioned to the other gender? All right, that's the kind of scare tactics that they get told. And then obviously other things is as the child gets older, they start to get exposed to social media, which is very much on the left, right, to be influenced as well. Now, at no point are these children, whether they are a newborn, right, and their parents, start them on this from that age, or at some point in between then and being, not a minor anymore. So I guess maybe up to 18. Right. At no point are kids of any of those ages wise enough to be making decisions for things of this magnitude. Right. Most of them shouldn't even be able to. Right. Most of them shouldn't even be allowed to drive. Right. They're terrible. Right. Most of them shouldn't even be allowed to drive when they're 18. And other things are like, even by the time they're 21 and they're allowed to legally drink, most of them still aren't smart enough to handle that properly. So I don't know why you would give them, the clearance to make decisions of this kind of magnitude with this kind of severe consequences that this sort of stuff has, because it's permanent. But in this case, the left is arguing, right, in this case, in the Supreme Court, the left is arguing that to deny this sort of stuff to minors, in particular, is the subject of this case, specifically about minors, not everyone, is a violation of the 14th Amendment. Right, this is the argument that they're making in the Supreme Court, is that it is a violation of the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment is basically, or the thing that they're arguing is to prevent discrimination based on immutable characteristics. Now, immutable characteristics means characteristics, just permanent characteristics. Immutable just means permanent, unchanging. Which you might see the contradiction of logic here, which is the left is trying to make the argument that this is discrimination based on an unchanging characteristic, so therefore you should have the ability to change this characteristic, right? You should have the ability to change the gender, even though it's an unchanging. So it's like it doesn't. You're contradicting yourself. So there is actually audio, because you don't have video of Supreme Court cases. You only ever get the audio. But there is audio of an exchange kind of going over that contradiction of logic in the Supreme Court between Justice Samuel Alito and the attorney for the left side of this case, who is a woman who thinks she is a man and is very much gone through procedures to kind of fulfill the delusion. But here is that exchange.
At one point, identify as female, but then later come to identify as male, and likewise for individuals who are assigned female at birth, at some point identify as female. Identify as male, but later come to identify as female. Are there not such people?
There are such people. I agree with that, Justice.
So it's not an immutable characteristic, is it? Are there individuals who?
So it's always fun to witness how the left tries to jump through hoops and then somehow make their logic and arguments fit together, even though, like, if they were puzzle pieces, they wouldn't even be from the same puzzle, right? Let alone fit. And then, of course, it's even more fun to witness these, things like we just heard here, where it's like exchanges where they basically go, like, you heard Justice Alito ask this question, and basically the response was just like, and then they basically they freeze up and go into a loading screen. It's always, and they just kind of process this contradiction of their beliefs and arguments being exposed right at their face. Right? It's always a treat to witness that mental collapse. But now, what is logic that does make sense is that this episode is over, and since this was the Saturday episode of this weekend, that means that there's going to be another episode tomorrow on Sunday. And in that episode, we're going to go over everything that wasn't as much of pressing news as the stuff gone over in this episode. Also, anything that might have broke in between, of course, the recordings of this episode and tomorrow's episode. So come back tomorrow for all that, and thank you for watching.